All right. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here. Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus is the former international spokesperson of the Israel Defense Forces and Reserve. He is responsible for the IDF's international traditional and social media operations, public affairs, and public diplomacy. In over 20 years of military service, Lieutenant Colonel Conricus has held a diverse array of positions in infantry, international relations, and military diplomacy. Prior to being appointed as the IDF's international spokesperson, Lieutenant Colonel Conricus was the first IDF officer to be seconded to the United Nations, serving in the UN Peacemaking Operations Office of Military Affairs in New York. Today, Lieutenant Colonel Conricus is here with us to provide answers to some of the hardest questions submitted by students from across the United States and Canada. Our goal in hosting this event is to help enhance your perspective on the unfolding war between Israel and Hamas. Lieutenant Colonel Conricus, welcome, and thank you for being here. This first question, first of all, I would like to ask you, how are you doing tonight? And how are your colleagues and some Israelis doing tonight?
Thank you, Nevo. You're Israeli, so you go straight to business. I appreciate that. Tachles, and I'll just say shalom, hello to everybody. Thankfully, I'm doing well, and most of the people that I know in the IDF and in Israel are doing well. Before we start, I just want to say a few things to help us level on what we're going to speak about. I was born in Israel, but I grew up in Sweden, and I made Aliyah when I was 13. I think I know pretty well the feeling of being surrounded by people who have different views, sometimes hostile views towards Israel, and at best different views on everything related to Israel. And I think that I understand that you are under quite a lot of pressure by your surroundings, people that may be your friends and classmates and university mates and whatnot, that are fed with a lot of information that are challenging you. And what I will try to do here is to provide answers, honest, truthful, and straight answers to the questions that I'll be presented with. I'll say that I'm a fan of IAC. When I lived for 3 years in New York with my family, we lived in Forest Hills in Queens, and I served for 3 years at the UN. And during those 3 years, part of that time, I also volunteered for an IAC program, not Michelanu, but Eitanim, where we help young, promising young adults, give them life skills and business skills. And I taught a little bit about leadership and working in less comfortable environments, which is pretty much what I'm doing now. So I hope you'll find this interesting, and I will really do my best to answer your questions. I anticipate that they will be challenging ones, and I will do my best to answer them as shortly and as shortly and as succinctly as possible. And I will also refer you to resources of information that you can use and enlighten yourself and use as a reference in the next, I don't know, cafeteria conversation over Israel on campus.
Thank you very much for that. So like you said, this first question is a very loaded topic. Thank you for sharing your background. This is very relevant. As Jews across the country experience growing aggression as the war in Gaza takes place, this first question by Andy Baylor from Boston, Massachusetts, was about how to talk about the war with our colleagues. What do I say to my non-Jewish friends who are questioning me about the amount of aid that Israel is getting and are saying that it only goes in support of occupation and genocide in Palestine?
Yeah, tough words there, genocide. Listen, let's dismantle that one by one. Genocide usually would mean that there would be a sharp decrease in a certain population subjected to genocide. And the best way I think of dismantling that is just looking at the Palestinian statistics of how many Palestinians live in Judea and Samaria and Gaza. If we were doing genocide, we would suck at it and we would be the worst in history of performing that horrible thing, because there are millions and millions more Palestinians today than before 1948 and before 1967. So that's on the factual level. On the spiritual or the moral level, I'll say that it's just nonsense. We have no such policy. We are a country that is surrounded by lots of enemies, that is dealing with terrorism and with many threats, and we are, as a result, fighting. We've gone through a lot of hardship. First, it was Arab armies that didn't accept the fact that we established a state in 47. And once we beat all of them in 48, 56, 67, and 73, then they started with terrorist attacks and terrorist organizations. I'm generalizing a bit, but this is the gist of it. And that's where we are now. When they understood that they cannot beat us on the battlefield, they started with terrorism. And that's still where we are. And we're facing continuous pressure from Iranian and other terror organizations. For someone who asks a question like that, it's difficult for me to really connect, because the mere thought that we would be conducting genocide, I think, is really abhorrent and indicative of someone who is really, how shall we say, drowning in BDS propaganda. But I would just, the bottom line would be, look at the numbers and see for yourself that there is no such thing going on, because the population is growing. And I'd say that Palestinians in Judea and Samaria live probably the best life of any Arab in about 2,000-kilometer radius. In terms of their liberties, their economic and social safety, their prospects for the future, their education, most of that is pretty good. I wouldn't want to be a Palestinian there, but if I compare them to their brothers in Jordan and Lebanon, Syria, of course, and Egypt and any other place, except for extremely rich oil countries, then I think that they are very well off. I understand their struggle for self-determination and desires, etc. That's all fine, but it won't be on our expense. I can tell you that. What was the? Oh yeah, about aid. I think that if anybody in the U.S. speaks about military aid to Israel, I think that is first and foremost in the interest of the U.S. to provide aid to Israel. We are grateful for it. We think it's very important and excellent, but I think that it serves U.S. foreign policy and its military industrial capabilities much more than it serves our security. The fact that we get the generous American military aid is perhaps the best marketer of American weapons, and it promotes sales like nothing else, because we win using American weapons. And I think that's an important thing. You can mention that to friends if they're American patriots, which, judging by the question, there might be room to question that. But if they're American patriots, then I'm sure that they'll appreciate the fact that we are contributing to American GDP and to the ability to continue to support the American defense industry.
Yeah. So with this topic of aid, there's another question that came from an anonymous student, and that goes on aid, sort of financial and physical aid on the other side of things. So some of us saw today that Hamas was trying to cover up footage of humanitarian corridor and to evacuate innocent civilians to areas where the IDF does not operate. How much on-the-ground aid do Gazans receive from the international community? And has any of the foreign countries with kidnapped citizens offered to help the IDF with its mission?
Yeah, so two distinctly different questions. There is aid coming into Gaza today. It's coming into the southern part of the Gaza Strip through the Rafah crossing. It is facilitated by Egypt. There's a lot of American involvement and help. And there's also the UN organization called UNRWA, which is part of it. It goes through Israeli security clearance at Nitzana, and then the trucks go up to Rafah and enter into Gaza. Today, I think there were 86 trucks, and tomorrow there's going to be more than 100. Many tons of humanitarian goods. We're focusing on food, medical supplies, and water. That's what's coming in. Fuel is not coming in and will not be coming in the foreseeable future because Hamas has fuel and they've been stockpiling it, and they are the ones preventing it from reaching hospitals and generators that pump the water desalination system and everything else. Hamas has a lot of fuel. We are not going to solve Hamas problems. And anybody that is asking us to, well, why don't you provide fuel for the civilians because they're in need? Our answer is no. They're on the responsibility of Hamas. Hamas governs the Gaza Strip. They've been governing since 2007, and the civilians there are Hamas' responsibility. Once Hamas runs out of fuel, then that question will be relevant. But what Hamas is doing now is that they are prioritizing their war-fighting efforts, as in providing air and electricity for their tunnel system and their rocket launchers and their combatants. Those are the priorities of Hamas, and not for running hospitals and providing clean water for civilians. I know that that isn't getting across in international media. Believe me, I've been hard at work trying to get that point across together with the others here in the IDF spokesperson unit. I know that isn't how reality is reflected, but that is the situation. And if you look, and your students, you can study long and hard the laws of armed conflict. There is absolutely zero demand for a party to a conflict. We are a party to a conflict, and Hamas is the other party. There is zero demand for us to provide humanitarian assistance to our enemies. And anybody that claims different just doesn't know what they're talking about. We are not obliged to provide anything to Hamas. Hamas is at war with us. They're responsible for civilians in Gaza. They prioritize what to do with their resources, and we prioritize to do with ours. Our priority with our resources, for instance, is to build Iron Dome and to build bomb shelters. Their priority is to build bunkers and tunnels, but not for the civilians, but for Hamas operatives, which is a key point to keep in mind. Now, regarding hostages, yes, there are many dual national hostages. Out of the 240 Israelis that were taken on the 7th of October, most of them civilians, women, children, toddlers. There's a 10-month-old baby who was 9 months old when he was taken, and unfortunately is celebrating a month birthday in captivity, which is horrible when you think of it. 10 months old, and there are children there. About 30 of the hostages are children. Then there's women, elderly, disabled people, people with mental difficulties. There's 2 Holocaust survivors that they dragged into Gaza. And then there's also soldiers, and there's men and aged women and men. So it's a mix. But yes, there are dual nationalities, and there's also foreign workers, Thai and Nepalese, who have nothing to do with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And if you encounter any of your so-called non-Jewish friends on campus, ask them, what on earth have Thai workers and Nepalese workers got to do with anything, and what was the logic behind taking them hostage? As perverse as it is, I can understand that Hamas would take Israelis hostage in their perverted reality of involving civilians in fighting, but I can't really understand what Nepalese and Thai workers are how they're going to be useful for them. Just wanton aggression and terrorist behavior. The other countries, there are some countries that are helping, trying to help. I cannot go into details, but there is intelligence cooperation, and we're trying to pool resources of other countries with advanced intelligence capabilities. What's the saying? Any broom works, or any broom does the job, right? Whatever we can get in order to help is a blessing, right? So because we don't want to spare any effort, our commitment is to get all of the hostages back. That is what we're committed to doing, and that's what we've told all of the families. Lieutenant General Herzi Halevi, the Chief of Staff, has said so very clearly, and that is what we're going to do. It's a tremendous task, one that no democracy has ever faced. We're facing it. We are determined to see it done. either by force or by ways of diplomacy or by other ways, but it will be done, just as Hamas is going to be dismantled at the end of this war.
Yeah, we did get quite a few questions about how the humanitarian issues around the topic of the Hamas Israel war. And I want to circle back to that actually at the end, because I want us to leave with a few tools on how to talk about it. But this next question is actually talking about the future of the conflict, and specifically about the situation in Gaza. It's coming from Carly Nevis. She's a social media manager for the NBA office in New York. And she's asking, in an ideal world, what is the most practical resolution to the conflict that would satisfy both the civilians of Gaza and Israelis?
Great question. We have to listen to the leadership of Hamas. What they've been saying all along, and we in Israel, for various reasons, political, military, I won't go into it, haven't been listening and paying attention, really. What they've been saying all along, and they even have the bravado to keep on saying it. The last time it was said was 4 days ago by Ghazi Hamed, who is a Hamas spokesperson at large. He's currently in Beirut, and we'll see where he goes next and if he goes anywhere, but he's currently in Beirut. And what he said in a interview on Lebanese television, we will do the 7th of October again and again and again until we defeat Israel. And then when he's asked, when you say occupation, what do you mean? Are you referring to the Gaza Strip? He says, no, entire Zionist entity, or I think he even said Israel. We won't stop until all the Jews are killed and until Israel is eradicated. And those are official, on-the-record statements made by a senior Hamas spokesperson. So we have to listen to that, right? We cannot continue to lie to ourselves and belittle what our enemies are saying. And if our enemies' charter, Hamas charter, is to obliterate the state of Israel, either kill, enslave, or convert Jews in Israel, and annihilate the state of Israel, then let's take their claims serious. Let's listen to what they say and what they've written and what they've been maintaining and working for over the last since 84, so the last almost 40 years. That is as long as Hamas has been in power, 84, 86, one of those years. So we have to listen to that. Why is that relevant? Because this is the other side, right? Many people now, ill-informed or perhaps evil, but let's give them the benefit of the doubt, misinformed young Americans out on the streets with flags of Palestine and chanting genocidal chants from the river to the sea, right? Let's call them misinformed. And let's say that they are motivated really by justice and by the demand of Palestinians for self-determination and equal rights and future and all of those beautiful things. Is Hamas the representative of that? Are the activities, the atrocities that Hamas did on October the 7th representative of that? Are the thousands of rockets fired by Hamas, 9,000 in this conflict alone against our civilians, are they representative of that? Or are the hostages that are being taken by Hamas and held for a month representative of that? I'm all for peace. I'm all for coexistence. I'm all for respect and education and prosperity and honor and all of those beautiful things and freedom and rights and all of that. But I am not for having even the slightest threat of a terrorist organization controlling terrain within running distance from the nearest Israeli community. That won't compute. So I do, however, draw some comfort. When you look at history and you look back at, dark times in world history, the Second World War, not that Gaza is Nazi Germany. I don't want to give them that credit because they're not that organized and they're not that industrious and they're not that serious and they're not German, thankfully. But it is really a concentration of evil. It is a population that has been indoctrinated to hate and to try to kill Jews wherever they are from very early infancy. So they're in a very dark place. They are engulfed by hatred and by radical Islamic teachings. We see the expressions of joy on Gazan streets as they were dragging corpses and abducted Israelis as they came back, and you cannot explain that away. Those responses and that barbaric behavior, and then you say, okay, how can we move forward? Well, I say, okay, let's look at Nazi Germany or Imperial Japan after those two periods and look at them today and say that if the world really cares about it, and if enough people really want a good future for Gaza and for Israel, then there are ways of educating, providing infrastructure, providing vocational training and investment in order to create a totally different future for Gaza. It's possible. It can be done. It's a matter of will, and it's a matter of international priorities. Israel won't be able to do it alone. I don't think that we want or can, but I think that if global stakeholders, led by the United States of America, think that it's important, then it can be done. And prosperity and honor and dignity are always the best antidote to the evil and violent teachings of Iran. Anybody who has who earns an honorable living and feels safe and lives a respectful life and can provide for his family and has prospects for the future, he's not going to go to war against his neighbor because he has a lot to lose. And if someday in the future there'll be teachings of democracy for Arabs in Gaza, that would be great. In the meantime, I don't see a rosy future. I see us defending ourselves very strongly against anything in Gaza. I see us retaining operational capability, operational freedom of movement to operate against whatever threats will re-emanate from Gaza for the foreseeable future. And I hope that there will be international buy-in and vision to fundamentally change the situation for the long term in Gaza, investing in education, infrastructure, vocational training, and really building something that is totally different from what we've had today. I don't think that just throwing aid at them will help. That won't be enough. They'll squander the aid just as they've been doing for so many years, and it'll be corrupt and mismanaged. But really, there's a need for something else. Not really the things that me as a military guy can speak about now. And I think that Israelis have gotten a very cruel awakening, including people in the communities around Gaza, who many of them were, ardent two-state solution believers and only peace and equal rights and coexistence and beautiful ideals. They are now held hostage inside Gaza with their beautiful ideals, which I also share. But I'm also, checking reality, and I understand that that isn't what we have on the other side. We have bloodthirsty terrorists on the other side, and first we need to eradicate them, and then there needs to be a long systemic process of change in Gaza, and then, inshallah, in the future, there might be something positive for Gazans and for Israelis.
Yeah, really, in an ideal world, like you said, more people or the global community will take more responsibility in the recovering of Gaza, and it's to understand that it's not just Israel's issue alone, and this is a global humanitarian issue, and the solution to it should and supposed to be global as well. And this next question is, if Hamas is obliterated completely, who's going to govern Gaza? How do we make sure it's not another terrorist organization with a different name?
Well, that kind of dovetails off the last question. And, we'll have to rally, and that'll be made by elected officials in Israel, let's say the political echelon. They will have to find the diplomatic solutions to, some kind of international coalition of willing countries that have the best interest of Gazans and Israelis at at heart, who will be willing to invest and help. I totally agree. We definitely do not want to have any kind of option for the Iranians to continue to pour venom and violence into Gaza and to exasperate humanitarian suffering, which is what Iranians usually do in their own country and around the world. We definitely want to block that. And hopefully it'll be used by regional powers as an opportunity, not only a burden, but as an opportunity to do good, and perhaps an extension of the Abraham Accords, perhaps investment options and opportunities for various countries that have the ability to invest. I can think of many positive things, but I don't want to preempt and say it already, but I think that we will have good opportunities once we free Gaza of Hamas and stabilize the situation there. It'll take time, and it won't necessarily be pretty in the beginning, but I think that in a few years, hopefully, we could be in a better place.
Thank you. Do you have any? We're about to be done. Do you have any final message you would like to give all of the people who joined us today? This session is also going to be recorded and distributed. But do you have any final message and perhaps maybe an advice or two about how to better advocate and better talk about the situation for people who live here and experience it from far away?
Yeah. I mean, I understand that you guys are under pressure. I understand that there's a massive outpouring of allegedly support for Palestinians. I understand that you see on your phones, and for those of you who watch TV, I don't know how many of you do, but if you watch TV and if you consume legacy media, then I'm sure that you're seeing a lot of unpleasant pictures coming out of Gaza of destruction and rubble and bodies being pulled out and all of those horrible things that nobody really wants to see and we cannot be indifferent to. So I understand that it's easy to be affected by this and by peer pressure, by friends. Some of them may be Jewish and some of them non-Jewish, and perhaps to succumb to the pressure. What I want to say to you, I could give you a long list of things. What I want to say really focuses on one thing. And I found this to be the biggest issue. And I've spoken at quite a few universities, and I've been engaged with IAC, and I've spoken at many APAC conferences with the future leadership, and many other locations. And I've spoken with many delegations in Israel of both Birthright and others. What I think is the biggest issue is belief in the justness of our cause. Because we can peel back a lot of things, and we can have factual discussions about a lot of things, and we can raise relevant questions. I don't think that Israel is right and correct in everything that we do. We're not. We've made our fair share of mistakes, and there are many Israeli policies that really suck, that should be different. Not going to get into it, but I don't think that we are perfect. But I do believe, really, within my heart, that we are trying to do the right thing, that we have every right to live here in peace, prosperity, and in our own ancestral homeland. And yes, even if people don't like it, this is our homeland that our ancestors populated long time ago, that we were expelled from, returned to, revived, caused it to flourish by hard work and toil and by fighting, and this is ours. Whether people like it or not, or if they have a competing narrative, doesn't matter. Israel is ours, and it is ours to defend and to nourish and to continue to flourish. That is the first and most important and basic understanding and thing that everybody needs to understand and know. And once you go from there and look at the situation and understand that, yes, Israel is here, it is just, should be defended and should be able to live in peace and prosperity. in its internationally recognized borders. And by the way, the communities in Gaza, all of them are within 1947, even 1947 UN partition plan Israel, not even armistice line 49, and definitely not 67. So if you're talking about legitimacy and all that, a good example. So the first and most important thing that I want to focus you on is, again, go back to the root and understand and believe and know that yes, we are justified to be where we are and to fight for our existence. That is one important thing. And then a lot of things, once that is set and understood, and that's maybe not be an easy process, then many other things will kind of fall into place. Just lastly, I'll say we work hard in order to disseminate trustworthy, verified information from the battlefield, from Israel, from what's going on. And if you want that type of information, and if you want answer to questions, etc., then our website is idf.il/en, as in English. Of course, our Twitter is @IDF. We have our Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and YouTube. Lots of information there. But if you don't, if you want to show your friends information that isn't the Israeli military, then I can understand if they don't want to see that information, even though we work hard in order to make it trustworthy. Then you can use information from American think tanks and research institutions. FDD, Foundation for Defense of Democracies, is one that I could recommend. The Washington Institute is another. And there are many good sources of information. You just have to find them and read up and use them. But really, most importantly, is getting above the noise and setting voices aside that undermine our very right to live here. What Hamas and many other Palestinians are saying for many, many years is that you Jews don't have a right to live here. And we will either eradicate you by force, which is Hamas, or by politics, which is what other parties are doing. And the answer should be no. This is our home. This is where we live. This is where we will die in old age, surrounded by our great-grandchildren. And we will live prosperous, beautiful lives in our ancestral homeland. And that's it. And if you don't like it, you can fight us, but we will beat you. And that's where we are now.
Thank you very much, Lieutenant Colonel Conricus, for this powerful message. Thank you for sharing some of your precious time. We know you're very busy right now, to say the least. So thank you for coming and joining us. And I would like to thank also all of our viewers who joined in, and this session again will be recorded and distributed. Thank you very much for coming. Have a good rest of the evening. Shalom. Bye.